Here's a number that sounds made up until you actually check it. Since the start of the 2022-23 season, Chelsea have spent roughly €466 million on centre-backs and full-backs alone. Not on the whole squad. Not on attackers. Not on midfielders. Not on goalkeepers. Just the back line. And with one more signing this summer, that number smashes straight through the 500 million mark. To put that in perspective, it's about 80 million more than Manchester City have spent on defenders in the same stretch, and almost double what European champions Paris Saint-Germain have spent on the entire position across 4 seasons combined. One club, one position, €500 million, and counting, and somehow it barely made headlines outside football finance circles. The key part is not the spending itself. It is how Chelsea made that spending look smaller on paper. Buried inside that €500 million is a genuine accounting trick, one that got so effective the entire sport had to change its rulebook just to stop Chelsea from using it again. Stick around, because by the end of this you'll understand exactly how a football club can spend £100 million and legally make it look like they spent 12. But before we get to the trick, let's put a face on this, because it's easy to talk about €500 million like it's just a number on a spreadsheet. It isn't. It's real players, real careers, real lives getting swept up in a financial experiment most of them probably don't fully understand either. Take the newest name in this story, Maxence Lacroix. He didn't arrive at Chelsea as some overnight sensation. His path started at Socox in French football's lower tiers, then a move to Wolfsburg in the Bundesliga, then Crystal Palace in 2024 for a modest £18 million. 2 full seasons there, 35 Premier League appearances in each one, an FA Cup, a Europa Conference League title, a France call-up, and 3 matches at this summer's World Cup. One French outlet described his rise perfectly, reaping the fruits of linear progression. No hype, no viral moment, just a defender quietly getting better every single year until the biggest clubs in Europe had no choice but to notice. And now that quiet, steady rise ends with a 6-year contract at Chelsea worth somewhere between £52 and £55 million, tying him to the club until 2032, at a reported accounting cost of about $14 million a year, every single year, for the length of that deal. For Lacroix personally, this is the reward for years of unglamorous, repetitive improvement. For Chelsea, he's just the newest part in what has become one of the strangest spending machines in modern football. So let's actually walk through how Chelsea got here, because the pace of it this summer alone is almost funny. It started with Marco Palestra, a 21-year-old right-back bought from Atlanta for around €57 million, plus sell-on clauses, instantly making him the joint 5th most expensive right-back in the entire history of the sport. A genuinely wild price tag for a player most casual fans had never heard of a year earlier. Less than a day after agreeing a club record €137 million deal for attacker Morgan Rogers, Chelsea turned straight back around and resumed their pursuit of Lacroix. That's 3 major defensive position signings inside a matter of weeks, on top of 2 deals for Giovanni Quenda and Emmanuel Omega that had already been agreed the year before. Total summer spend, somewhere north of £250 million, and this is now the 5th summer running that Chelsea have spent over £200 million in a single window. Zoom out even further and the scale gets almost absurd. Since Todd Boehly and Clearlake Capital's consortium completed their takeover in the summer of 2022, Chelsea have spent more than £1 billion across just their first 2 transfer windows, bringing in 14 new players before most clubs had even finished their pre-season planning. And here's the detail that made the whole football world start asking questions. It wasn't just how much they were spending. It was how they were spending it. Chelsea started handing out contracts that made absolutely no sense on paper, until you understood exactly why they were doing it. Winger Mykhailo Mudryk signed an 8.5-year deal worth £88.5 million, at the time the longest contract in Premier League history. Enzo Fernandez, brought in for a then British record fee of around £107 million, signed the same length. Benoit Badiashile signed for 7.5 years. Noni Madueke for 7.5. Almost nobody in football history had ever seen contracts this long. And this is the trick we promised you at the start. Clubs are allowed to spread the cost of a transfer fee evenly across the length of a player's contract for financial fair play purposes, a practice called amortisation. Take that Mudryk deal as the clearest example. Under old rules, an £88.5 million fee spread over 8.5 years costs a club roughly £10 million a year on the books. Spread that exact same fee over a standard 5-year deal instead, and it costs almost £18 million a year. Same player, same transfer fee, same manager, same trophy cabinet. But one version makes Chelsea's spending look less than half as aggressive every single year, purely because of how many years the contract happens to run. Rival clubs noticed almost immediately, and some openly accused Chelsea of cheating the spirit of financial fair play, even though nothing about it was technically against the rules at the time. The pressure built high enough that UEFA closed the loophole in the summer of 2023, capping amortization at a maximum of 5 years regardless of how long the actual contract runs. The Premier League followed just months later, with 15 clubs, Chelsea included, voting in favor of the same 5-year cap. And here's the twist that tells you everything about how well this worked out for them. The new rule wasn't backdated. Every long contract Chelsea had already signed in that opening 18-month spending spree still gets to be amortized over its full original length. Mudryk, Fernandes, Badiashile, all still stretched out exactly the way Chelsea originally planned, completely unaffected by the rule change built specifically because of them. They got to use the trick, then helped vote to ban everyone else from using it after they'd already banked the advantage. Which brings us to something almost nobody clocks while it's happening, because it's honestly a little funny once you notice it. In the very same summer, Chelsea are spending 50+ million on a new centre-back in Lacroix. They've also sold outgoing defender Marc Cucurella to Real Madrid for around £51 million, a player who'd been a regular fixture in their backline for 2 seasons. Around the same time, academy graduate Andre Santos moved to Manchester United for £48 million, and winger Tariq George left for Everton in a £24 million deal. One club, simultaneously buying and selling players in the exact same defensive areas, in the exact same transfer window, while also loaning out an established first-team winger elsewhere entirely. It isn't hypocrisy exactly. Most big clubs churn their squads constantly, but it does capture something true about how Chelsea currently operate. They're not building a defense so much as running a permanent defensive assembly line, parts constantly coming in, parts constantly going back out, funded by a financial model built specifically to make the incoming half of that always look smaller on paper than it actually is. And this isn't only about central defenders and fullbacks either. It's the whole engine behind Chelsea's spending in general. That same £1 billion outlay in year 1 was partly balanced out by selling players like Mason Mount, Kai Havertz, and a handful of others for a combined figure north of £260 million, meaning even the eye-watering gross spending numbers you see in headlines rarely tell you what Chelsea actually banked in net terms. And the losses were real too. Across the 2022 and 2023 financial years alone, Chelsea posted combined losses before tax of more than £210 million, even while extending careful accounting cover through those long contracts. It's a club running 2 completely separate financial games at once, one in transfer fees, one in accounting, and somehow keeping both spinning without falling foul of the very regulations built to stop clubs from doing exactly this. So here's the actual question worth asking, and it isn't really about the money at all, because Chelsea's ownership clearly has enough of it to keep doing this indefinitely. It's whether any of it is actually working. For the first 2 or 3 years of this experiment, the answer looked genuinely bad. 3 different permanent managers cycling through the dugout in barely 2.5 years. A squad so bloated some fringe players couldn't even get registered for domestic or European matches, and results that didn't come close to justifying the outlay, including a season where Chelsea finished outside the European places entirely despite being among the biggest spenders on the planet. But this year carries a different tone. New manager Xabi Alonso is now the one shaping this rebuilt back line, and Chelsea head into the season as reigning club World Cup winners, the first real piece of silverware to land since the spending started in earnest. And somewhere in the middle of all these numbers and loopholes is a 26-year-old who spent years grinding through League 2, the Bundesliga, and mid-table Premier League football just to get here. Now walking into a dressing room that cost more to build than most countries spend on their entire national infrastructure budgets in a year. Whether €500 million on defenders alone turns into sustained success, or just becomes the most expensive cautionary tale in modern football finance, is still genuinely up in the air, and Lacroix's own performances over the next year might end up being one of the clearest signals either way. Either way, you have to admit it's one of the strangest financial experiments the sport has ever run in real time, in full public view, one long contract at a time, and the accountants closing the loophole almost a year too late to stop the damage already locked in. So what do you think? Smart long-term rebuild finally about to pay off under Xabi Alonso, or the accounting version of throwing money at a problem and hoping it eventually fixes itself? Drop your take in the comments, and subscribe for more of the numbers behind the headlines.